So will we or should we see a reversal in vaccine policy where the center now procures all vaccines and gives them free for all to all the states? I'm joined by Tamil Nadu's Finance Minister, Dr. Palanivel Thiagarajan. So Dr. Thiagarajan, the big question, particularly after the Supreme Court observation yesterday that the government's policies were arbitrary and irrational, is simply this. Should, in your view, all vaccines be free for all? Should the center bear the whole burden of paying for the vaccines and procure all of them centrally? Opposition rule states like yours seem to suggest that it is the center's responsibility for procurement and payment of all vaccines to ensure that they are free for all, whether 18 to 44 or 45 plus. Let's get clarity. What is the basic reasoning that you and others now have for this? Your position?
Yeah, I think my position is as you'd expect it to be, that the center has already made a commitment during its budget speech, the Honorable Union Finance Minister's budget speech, that they had allocated 35,000 crores at 100 rupees a dose as the deal that they struck with the vaccine makers. That is a kind of 3.5 billion doses. So I expect that they would get it, but I think it's not... when somebody talks their book, when there's a potential conflict of interest, you should ask their reasoning. And I'm happy to give you my reasoning if you ask.
No, I want your reasoning. I want your reasoning because the center is saying that the states wanted the responsibility of going to the manufacturers and procuring the vaccines. That the states wanted a greater say in vaccine procurement. According to the center, that has not worked. There is a U-turn and the buck is being passed back to the center, this time for vaccine shortage. According to the center, the states were the ones who forced the government of India to change its policy from focusing on 45 plus to the policy of granting the states and private hospitals to vaccinate those between 18 to 44, and that's where the differential pricing took place. Your response, therefore?
Yeah, so let me kind of break this down in 4 parts. I don't want to talk for too long, so interrupt me if I go too far and I'll stop. The first is, what has been the center's attitude so far? The center has concentrated all authority onto itself in every field, including, for example, in the field of health education. Though they say now that health is a state subject, they are the ones who basically said that they will decide which exam should be conducted for medical admission. So the center has this strategy of playing it both ways. When it suits them, they say, we'll take care of it. When it doesn't suit them, they say, no, you take care of it. For example, on the purchase of drugs like Remdesivir, we had open contracts with the central government to cover the purchase orders, saying that we will acquire all the drugs and allocate them proportionally because there's a constraint in manufacturers. So this brings up the question, is it an open market, a free market or not? An efficient market will have many buyers, many sellers, and the ability to get a fair price based on supply and demand. That's the indication or the validity of an efficient market. You can have many kinds of inefficiencies in a market, starting with structure. You could have, for example, only monopoly or oligopoly manufacturers and sellers, or you could have monopoly or oligopoly buyers. In this case, we have this weird situation where there's only an oligopoly of sellers. And who gets to decide who the oligopoly is? The central government gets to decide which are the approved vaccines. The states don't get to do it. For example, they have not approved Pfizer or Moderna. They only approved Covishield and Covaxin and Sputnik. So if you have an oligopoly situation that was created by the center, isn't it much better to have a monopoly buyer like the center rather than have all states go fend for themselves? Next question, what are the market technicals? Here you have a situation where the entire world is trying to buy and there is not enough supply. So you have a far kind of imbalanced demand-supply situation. The last thing you want is to have 10 states compete against each other. You could have relatively wealthy states like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu who have already put global tenders in because we can afford to buy. What happens to the UPs and the Bihars? So it is the center's job to be the kind of fair divider and to be a monopoly buyer against the oligopolists and divide it. And finally, I would say, how does a center tolerate a manufacturer like Serum Institute setting 3 different prices for 3 different buyers? Is this like a luxury good? Is it like a niche marketing strategy? How does the center tolerate this? Under times of stress, even the normal constraints of a government are removed. For example, all over the world, in a disaster scenario, you don't have to go through the normal tendering process. That's true in Tamil Nadu, that's true in Delhi, that's true in the UK, that's true in the US. When even that can be broken, how does the center not tell these serum manufacturers, the Serum Institute and the other Bharat Biotech, that we will just take over the supply, you sell it to us at the uniform price? How does it allow them, in a country that is otherwise highly regulated, how does it allow vaccine manufacturers to set three different prices based on the class of buyer? It makes no sense to me.
No, it makes no sense to you that the government of India is allowing vaccine manufacturers, you're saying, to set the price for the 18 to 44 age group in particular. But let me take off from that point. The center could well argue that as far as procurement of vaccines is done, they were procuring it at a fixed price for those above 45, and through government centers, they were giving it free for all. Now, the fact is that the private sector cannot be controlled by the state. What private hospitals do is the state does not have control. You are saying you want regulation today and control as far as government procurement goes. What happens then to the whole idea of an open, liberalized vaccine policy that people were talking about a few months ago? Are we saying that there can be no open, liberalized market for vaccines? Can we not have categories? Those who can afford to pay for it will pay through the private system. The rest get it free for all. Is it not possible to have two parallel tracks, Dr. Tyagarajan?
Yeah, I think you could in a normal situation. I keep trying to make the distinction that we are not in a normal situation. We are in a disaster. We are in a pandemic. Most of us can invoke our disaster management acts if we have not already done so. The whole world has done that. Everybody is in a unique global situation. The US has pumped in more than 1.5 times its annual budget in supplemental financial support to its citizens. So in a situation like this, to pretend that you're somehow a pro-industrialist or a pro-capitalist kind of government seems to me extremely the wrong time to send the wrong signal. In fact, I would go one step further. I would not be averse to the notion of the center nationalizing the two manufacturing facilities, because I'm told they have the capacity to manufacture up to 100 million vaccine doses a month. In the next 6 months, you could completely vaccinate the whole country, and after that, let it go whichever way it goes. You don't have to do it permanently. Here's a country where we've nationalized the banks. Why do we have a problem that we have to allow unrestricted free enterprise during a pandemic when you have an oligopoly of only two manufacturers for vaccines?
Because you're saying something major. You're saying in a pandemic you may have to nationalize the whole system of vaccine procurement, because let's be very clear. The fact is that companies will want to be incentivized to manufacture vaccine. You're telling me now that at least for the next 1 year, these companies work no profit, no loss, no profiteering, and they are nationalized by the government of India. Government of India controls them in a way.
No, I'm not saying that is my preferred solution. My preferred solution is that the government should buy up their entire production at the fixed rate of 100 rupees that they had already negotiated, by 200 million doses a month, and supply all the states and get it done as quickly as possible, number one. Number two, open up additional vaccines through the approval process, which have already gone through FDA approval or European approval, like Pfizer, like Moderna, and increase the potential seller list, expand the oligopoly of sellers into 4 or 5, and then say, over and above what I am supplying you, 200 million doses to the country, to the states of the country, within my regime, buy 100 and give it to you. Don't forget, they have made arrangements financially, according to them, to buy 350 crore vaccines at 100 rupee rate that they have fixed. So my point is, either you take over 100% of the supply and let the actual management run it, no problem. If you believe that the actual management is going to be profit-seeking and try to sell it for 300 or 600, then you nationalize it, I have no problem.
You are saying something very significant, and in a way what you are saying is also that the states therefore will have no role at all in procurement. The entire supply will be centralized and then the distribution will be done by the states. Am I correct? Because earlier some states were raising a red flag. For example, why is the Prime Minister's face on vaccination certificates? Now, as you say, the center did budget 35,000 crores. If they were to procure them all through what they budgeted, they could then take credit for the vaccines as well. Now, where does that leave the states? Will the states then again raise some kind of a red flag? Or are you very clear? The center will procure and the states will distribute the vaccines and free for all. And the states are solely distributors. The center is the procurer and they take the credit as a result.
I'm sorry, I don't think this is a question of states. I don't think it's a question of where the money comes. Mr. Modi is the first person when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat who asked the question to the Union government, where does this money come from? Does it fall from the sky? It comes from the states. Let's not a seasoned journalist like you should not confuse the people's money, whether collected by government A or government B, and one individual who happens to sit in an elected chair. It's coming out of his ancestral property in his pocket, right? Whose money is it? It is the people's money. Whether it is spent by the union government or the state government, it is the people's money. Let's not get really worked up about these nuances of who gets credit and all that. The people's money should be used to buy vaccines for the people in the most efficient way possible.
I like that one line. People's money should be used to buy vaccines for the people in the most efficient manner. And certainly you seem to be suggesting free of cost for all. Are you saying though that, many will ask the reason for the vaccine shortage? A lot of this center-state conflict, Dr. Tyagarajan, has started because states like yours are facing a vaccine shortage. Now, there are two views. One is because the center did not place firm orders early enough and therefore we are suffering from a vaccine shortage. The other is that it is because of vaccine hesitancy also now that states like Tamil Nadu are struggling. Your Chief Minister M.K. Stalin had raised questions over vaccinations a few months ago. There are questions also which the center is raising over vaccine wastage because as per last week, Tamil Nadu had a 15% vaccine wastage. So where is the problem? Where is the stumbling block at the moment? Why is the vaccine drive not taking off?
Yeah, listen, I don't know about all these hypotheticals. I am in charge of the Madurai district corona management from the 8th of May as my leader has designated me. Every day we use up 100% of the doses of vaccines we have given. We have among the highest inoculation rates for our priority sectors, which is the factory workers, the temple priests that we have now expanded to, the frontline health workers, the police. Every single day, as many doses as we can get, we exhaust them. We are in a supply constraint situation. I don't want to get into hypotheticals about hesitancy, this, that, and all that. I think the noise gets kind of in the way between the ground and people like you in Delhi and Bombay, where a lot of this gets extraneous noise.
No. So are you saying now that the vaccine problem in the country is purely a supply constraint problem? There's no vaccine hesitancy, no vaccine wastage, or that these are non-issues, that all that remains is that you need to have a more efficient system of vaccine procurement, which is centralized, and distribution, which is then done by the states. Am I correct?
I completely am saying that. I'm saying maybe there are places in the country where there is vaccine hesitancy. In Tamil Nadu, there is not. In Madurai, there is not. Yesterday, we almost ran out of supply. By good fortune, we got supply last night. This morning, we have continued inoculation. I have been to 2 different places, and we will exhaust the entire supply given to us. 17,000 doses given to us yesterday. We will exhaust it either by tonight or tomorrow morning.
Net, Dr. Tyagarajan, what is the solution? Because the goal surely is a common one, whether states or center, to vaccinate as many Indians, if not all, above the age of 18 by the end of this year. I want to know, do you believe that is feasible? Do you believe that the government can actually vaccinate every Indian, which would be about 200 billion doses, 2 billion doses, which would be about 90 lakhs per day? The government says starting the middle of July, they will vaccinate at least 1 crore Indians every day. Do you believe that is feasible? Do you believe there is a roadmap that needs to be put in place today?
If my understanding of the situation is correct, right now we have 3 vaccines approved. First of all, we should expand that list. I think we should expand to Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, whoever has it. Because if they've gone through the process of the UK NHS or the FDA or the Europeans, I assume they're good enough for us. But even were we to take only these 3, the best data that I have is that Serum Institute currently at about 65 million doses a month can get up to 100 million. So can Bharat Biotech. so can the Russian thing can do 100 million a year, setting up a local facility here, 3-4 million a month, or maybe 5-8 million a month. I also know there are facilities that are mothballed, like the half-completed facility in Chengalpat, which our chief minister has asked whether we can take it on lease, the government of Tamil Nadu. And the central government keeps saying, no, we have a different partner, no, maybe, no, yes, no, they have to invest 300 crores. So we can expand production from the current 200, 210, or, whatever the stated capacity. Let's say that's wrong. Let's say that's only about 180 million. Surely, in the next 6 months, the government can both ensure production and acquisition and distribution to actually get to all the people. Just to buy insurance, I would approve 2 or 3 more vaccines that have already gone through the rigorous process and had tens of millions of people already vaccinated by those vaccines around the world. We know that those work. So, if I was in charge, I would say, how can I enhance my supply to the maximum possible to get, 2 billion doses? A billion Indians who are eligible, between the ages of 18 and however old, multiplied by 2, minus the 140 million or something, or 200 million we've done now. How quickly can we get there? That should be the only consideration. And if that requires a monopsony or a monopoly or a flat rate, whatever it requires to take us from here to there, that should be the target. And we shouldn't get distracted by these other variables of, politics and who said and whose photograph and what vaccination and who gets to register and all these things. I think they just complicate the picture.
No, let's be clear. These distractions are being brought in by the politician. These center-state conflicts are being done by politicians. The question that what I sense is a huge trust deficit between the center and opposition state governments and state governments in general. And my fear is going ahead, that's going to be critical to ensure that this vaccination drive is universal and efficient. Because if the vaccine policy continues to get caught in center-state tangles, that's the worst thing that could have happened. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think, Rajdeep, consistency and compassion should be the basis of relationships. So when we have already had a contentious GST compensation debate, when we already feel that the government has not treated us fairly by saying that 41% or 42% of the divisible pool should be given to the states, but they have expanded the cesses by over 80% in the last 5 years. When we already have, should the compensation be set at 14% or 7% or 0%, should it be borrowed by X or borrowed by Y, in the GST discussion. When the center has already said everybody's purchase orders for antiviral medication is subsumed by us, we take control and we are going to be a monopoly procurer. When you have this backdrop, it is very hard now to say, no, let's have good relationships. I think relationships are built over time, built by consistency, built by compassion. And I think the center should really contemplate those things in the way it treats every issue, because they all add up. It's not all, at some level, they are different issues, but at some other level, they all affect the overall relationship. So I would say the overall relationship needs work. It must come from the elder partner in the relationship, which is the union, because that's where the taxes are collected, the licensing is done, the import-export rules are set, the validation for even states to go and do outside contracts is done through Delhi. We cannot take multinational loans without Delhi kind of doing a back-to-back. We cannot do borrowing without the center's approval for normal budgetary purposes. So when the union retains such great power, then really the first step for normalizing or enhancing or more cordial relations should come from the union.
You've raised very, very valid points, Dr. Thiagarajan. I must confess, you remain to me one of the most articulate political voices in the country at the moment. That line will stick with me. This is people's money for a people's vaccine that should be done efficiently. And I hope that center and state can work together.